Welcome to the Wellspring Counseling Podcast. My name's Jonathan Kittle. I'm joined today by Claire Brown. Thank you so much, Claire, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited. We're going to be talking about the pressure to be perfect, a topic that we've talked about a few times offline, and very excited to jump into that. But before we do, can you tell the listeners a little bit about who you are? You've been here at Wellspring for a few months, but you've been in the counseling field a good bit longer than that. Tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, how you got into counseling, and maybe a little bit about the work you do.
Yeah, I have been in counseling since, I started my master's in 2019. I finished it in 2021. So I had experience in the hospital setting and in private practice as well during that time of working on my master's. And then right out of graduation, I started working at the Carolina Center to get some experience with an inpatient setting where I could learn a lot in a short amount of time. There's a lot of exposure to different things. It's a great place
to get experience. I worked there myself for a few years.
Yeah, it's great. The environment is good. The people who work there are great. But it was a lot of fun because I got to work on the Unit 1, which is dual diagnosis. So they focus on addiction and other issues that come up, like anxiety, depression, and things like that. So it was challenging to learn about addiction. I had never had experience with that prior to starting work there. And then I was on Unit 1 by myself for a little while.
Yeah, that can be hard.
So it was fun, but I'm thankful for the experience just because I don't think I would have ever gotten that anywhere else.
Yeah, for sure.
If I had gone right into private practice. And then I moved to the adolescent unit. And that was a lot of fun. Got to do groups with the adolescents and individual sessions and also do family sessions.
Yeah. Powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And tell us a little, tell us some about what you're doing now here at Wellspring and who you're working with.
I am working mostly with adolescents right now. I am seeing adolescents struggling with a range of things, mostly anxiety. That seems to be the big one.
Yeah.
I'm working with guys and girls, so it's a lot of fun to get to work with both. And let's see, I like it because I get to work with the families and the adolescents, so the parents are involved in the process.
Right. And
that's a good way to learn how to navigate family therapy in a way while meeting with the adolescent alone. And just, it's really neat to get to help the parents learn how to help their child.
I agree. And I firmly believe that, parents are ultimately they're the greatest asset the kids have. So if we can work with them, empower them, we're doing the teen a lot more service. You work with adults as well. You work with some women.
Yes.
Would you say anxiety is also a big issue there?
For sure. I think anxiety, it seems to be on the rise, but definitely in women. And then some depression with women. Yeah. As well. For sure.
They often run together. Well, I love the topic that you have chosen for today, this pressure to be perfect. And let's jump in and maybe have you share a little bit about when someone is experiencing that pressure to have to be perfect. What does it look like? How does that problem begin to kind of show up in the lives of clients?
Yeah, that is a big question. But
I know, sorry.
Let's see. I think it's important to define this. So we all know about perfectionism. We hear about it a lot, but a lot of times it's partly pressure that we put on ourselves. But then there's also this component of pressure that we get from the outside, whether that is through peers or family, school, social media.
Lots of external kind of factors.
Yes. And those external factors are playing into our thought process and how we compare ourselves to other people or expectations that we might set for ourselves. I do think that anxiety and this pressure to be perfect, it's important to note that past experiences play into this.
Right.
And maybe even genetics. So there's multiple things that can play into this, and it's neat in counseling because we get to look at what those are for the specific person.
Yeah.
But it's these unrealistic expectations and these rules that we have for ourselves. One way to think about it would be in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. We talk about cognitive distortions.
Yeah.
So one category of cognitive distortions is all or nothing thinking. And that is this black or white thinking. It's either absolute success or it's absolute failure. There's not really any in between. And one way I see this play out with people, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this, where people actually think, if I make an A, then that's good. But anything less than that, I might as well have failed.
Wow.
And so there's this striving to just get an A. If it's like an A minus, it's even sometimes not good enough.
Not enough. So you're saying, if I'm hearing you right, like there's a variety of factors that could cause perfectionistic kind of striving. But one of the big ones that you see is an attitude or a mentality where it's like extreme. It's either it's got to be so good or else it's all bad. All or nothing.
Yeah, all or nothing. It puts us in this frame of mind where we can't see gray. Like if it's a B, it's not good enough. We have to get the A. Have to even I've heard of people where it's like they have to get almost a 100 on an assignment.
Do you think people are aware that they have that attitude? Like, are they conscious and self-aware that they have these perfectionistic longings, or almost like they're burdened with this kind of, I have to get it this good? Or does this kind of lurk in the background beneath or under the waterline of even what they're aware of?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the person. Some people, the people that are in counseling and talking about this that I've met, they're aware of it and it really frustrates them. It's not something that they're enjoying having. And it's difficult because they might not enjoy that they are experiencing that, but it's still something that they feel that they need.
Part of them doesn't like it and is frustrated by it, but the other part, it really feels like it has to be that way.
Yes, it's hard to see another way.
Wow. Okay. Tell us a little bit more about, just what that pressure does to people, how it impacts people.
Yeah. One thing that I see with that is symptoms of burnout.
Okay.
And so when we get into this mode, we are working so hard that it's almost like being on a hamster wheel. And so it can lead to symptoms of burnout, like exhaustion, difficulty concentrating, difficulty completing tasks, performance at work or school might go down because of it. And so it makes it difficult for people to rest when we're in this way of thinking.
Yeah, I could connect that. I think I'm with you. Like, so people start burning out, getting tired and exhausted, irritable, and more so. They end up there because they've been on a hamster wheel. Sorry. And they're on that hamster wheel because they're thinking, I have to be perfect. I can't stop working.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I'm thinking about how to connect the dots, but it can even lead people to, if they once cared about their math grade a lot, another symptom of burnout could be that suddenly they're indifferent to it or apathetic about it.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
But we get in this overworking period, and so I think it has an effect on our bodies and our minds, and leads us to actually not be able to perform as well as we could have if we were having periods of rest. And
wow, this is ironic. You're saying, like, if we're striving and I have to be perfect at the math thing that I'm doing, I'm going to burn out eventually. I might even on the surface show like, or have this sense like I don't care anymore, which doesn't really sound, I think when I hear perfectionist, I think of someone who like cares about everything, but it doesn't always show up like that. I guess they might have become apathetic because they burned out. And then say you were talking about performance, like they're not actually even doing. What are you talking about?
yeah, so this would just be in the case of someone who's experiencing the perfectionism so much that it leads to burnout.
Okay.
Like it's going unchecked.
Okay.
So it could be from a prolonged period of having this, and then these symptoms starting to
There's
come
like
up.
a tipping point where
it's not like
ceases to
something
work.
that happens overnight where, I was trying to be perfect last week and now I'm,
struggling
fully
today.
burned out. But
It takes a while.
I mean, I think even a day of experiencing all or nothing thinking, you might feel tired the next day.
It takes a toll, I would imagine.
Definitely.
I say that like I've never done it. Yeah. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on your perspective, we also experience this kind of stuff too. We're human.
Definitely. Another cognitive distortion is catastrophizing. So
Okay.
seeing only the worst possible outcome. If we're seeing only the worst possible outcome of a situation, we might be working really hard to make sure that doesn't happen.
You have any examples of that? Seeing the worst. I'm only seeing the worst. So I'm working so hard to make sure that the worst doesn't happen.
Yeah. I've had clients tell me this where they say, I made a bad grade, or I might get a bad grade on this test, or I did get a bad grade on this test. Suddenly, that means I'm going to fail this class. Then I'm going to have to drop out of school or get held back or repeat the grade.
Okay.
Suddenly, getting a bad grade turns into I'm not going to college.
If this snowball starts rolling, they see the avalanche. They see way down into the future. Okay.
Yeah. So they don't want to not go to college.
Of course.
So that's a big goal of theirs. And so then they're going to work really hard to make sure that doesn't happen.
Right. But at some point, that's going to take a toll on their body, on their mind, ironically, even their performance.
Yes.
Okay. What else have you learned about, and what are you observing just, about this pressure to be perfect? This stuff's really insightful. Catastrophizing thoughts, all or nothing thinking, burning out.
Yeah. One analogy that I like for this comes from the book by Thomas Curran called The Perfection Trap. And he was talking about how with perfectionism, it's like we see the horizon in the distance and we're trying to get there, but the horizon keeps on changing. It keeps on going back. So it seems to be like a never-ending cycle.
Yeah.
And that goes along with the cognitive distortions, but it was a good analogy for me because I can definitely get into that way of thinking where it's like I'm excited because I think I'm getting there. I'm going to get this right. And then suddenly there's something new. Or maybe there's a new area where I'm like, well, I've been focusing so much on this that I've neglected this. And
the target keeps moving, the horizon keeps moving. We think like, I'm getting there, I'm close. I can relate personally to that. That's a powerful metaphor. Can we talk some about what helps?
For sure. With the cognitive distortions, if we're looking at it from a CBT perspective, and again, I want to note that in counseling, it's so much more complex than this. Sometimes, there might be other factors going on. And so we talk about past experiences or how this is affecting your nervous system and all of that. But if we're approaching it from a CBT perspective where we want to challenge these negative thoughts, then I'll use something called a CBT thought record.
Okay.
Where we write down our thoughts and then we identify the emotion that we're having. And then we might put on a scale of 1 to 10 what that emotion is at as far as the intensity of it. And then the next part is challenging the thought. So one thing I've always done with people is when we're challenging the thoughts, let's say we're challenging all or nothing thinking, or we're challenging catastrophizing, we want to neutralize the thought. And so I've noticed lately there's like this big thing about positive affirmations, and I think that's good in some ways.
Okay.
But with this, it's important that we go neutral and that we just identify something that is really simple and true that our brain can latch on to.
What's the danger about trying to go too positive? I like what you're saying. I'm intrigued.
Yeah. Positive, I mean, if it's true, then okay. But sometimes these positive affirmations, maybe they sound good, but our brain knows that they're not realistic.
Okay.
And so with challenging our thoughts, we want to pick things to latch on to that are easy to digest.
Something that your brain can believe.
Yeah, something that we can believe.
Okay.
Like if the thought is I'm the worst or I can never get anything right, then the positive affirmation or the overly positive would be like, I'm the best person ever.
Yeah.
And so if we're struggling with anxiety, it's going to be pretty hard for that to be something that we can go back to. And
begins to sound a little like narcissism in some ways.
Yeah. And there's other positive affirmations that I think are good. They're not all like that or
no, of course.
That's a little ridiculous, but
I'm with you. Sometimes they can be a little too much, and I don't think we often understand the downside of that.
Yeah.
So aim to neutralize the negative, catastrophic, all or nothing thought. You don't have to like jump to the other extreme.
Like today is going to be a great day. Well, we don't know. It might be. It might be good. It might have a mix, and that's okay. But with the one that I'm thinking about, like I'm the worst, I can never get it right. That is kind of wrapped up in this perfectionist way of thinking where our worth and our value is dependent on what we do.
Okay.
And with perfectionism, we're constantly asking, am I enough? Is what I'm doing enough? And when our value is placed on what we do and our performance, grades, getting into a certain school,
athletics,
making the basketball team, making varsity versus JV, our value is in things that change and things that are dependent on us getting it right or doing it perfectly. And so with neutralizing, we want to find things that are easy to believe. One thing that I'll say is that we want to pick something that doesn't ever change, because these are things that do change.
Okay.
Your grades might change week to week, but what is something that we can find that doesn't change at all?
It's making a lot of sense. Can you give, let's just dive in a little more specifically. What are some of the statements you hear people say, or ones that you've recommended, or things, we might say to ourselves?
Yeah, I think it's different depending on if this is a person that comes from a certain faith background. They might draw from that.
Sure.
If they're not, they can still, there will be other things. But one thing that I'll usually say for everyone that's universally true, and I think everyone agrees with, is just that human beings have value just because they exist.
Yeah.
And so
I'm valuable because I'm human. Humans are valuable.
Yes. My value, you could say something like, my value does not lie in what I do, but just because I am a human.
I'm human. I'm valuable just because I'm breathing.
Mm-hmm. If I'm talking to someone who's from a certain faith background, then we might use that as something that doesn't change.
Yeah, I'm made in God's image, from the kind of Judeo-Christian perspective, or something like that.
Yeah, I have worth and value. God loves me no matter what.
Yeah.
Nothing I do will take that away or change it. And so it's even better in the CBT thought record if we can have like proof of that. We'll add like a scripture verse or something. Yeah. But having it be really simple. Because
anxious mind is wired to see danger, right? And so it is not going to let up easy. If you make a claim that you're okay, or you're good enough, or you have value just because you're human, it's not going to believe you unless there's some clear evidence.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's helpful. I mean, if we're talking about Christianity and the Bible, then small scripture verses are easy for people to write down and just put places they can see. But even if you're not using that, you can still write the other things down and
for sure
put them places. And
even I wonder, what about even like evidence from experience? So like, I did well on the last couple tests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I haven't failed a grade yet.
Right.
So I'm probably not going to fail this one.
Right. If we're talking about proof, I think that's really good. Mm-hmm. We will go back and say, there might have been times I didn't get a good grade, but I still didn't fail.
Yeah.
And I'm still moving on to the next grade. What's the likelihood that's going to happen now? So we'll do that as a way to help with the cognitive distortion sometimes.
So these thought records, this is stuff that gets brought up in counseling. You're kind of weighing the evidence and trying to grab hold of like what's actually true. And then our bodies kind of catch up, our feelings catch up. Tell us more about like what else helps.
With that, we're looking at the cognitive behavioral triangle. So that one says thoughts lead to emotions, emotions lead to behaviors. Another thing that I'll say, if that's addressing the thoughts, and then that can kind of regulate our emotions, because at the end of the thought record, we go back to the emotion we listed first that we put on the scale, and we'll say, okay, you were feeling discouraged at the beginning and it was at an 8. That feeling might not be gone, but where would you say it falls on the scale now? And even if they go from an 8 to a 6, it still made a difference.
And it sends a message like what I say to myself, what I'm thinking matters.
Our thoughts do matter, and it's important that we look at them and see what's true and what's not, and try to hold on to what we know to be true and make that as easy to digest as possible.
I think it's really empowering. It actually cuts against the helplessness that we could all feel whenever we're not feeling good, anxious, depressed. We can then get really helpless. But to see like that nothing changed, the situation didn't change yet. All I changed was my perspective, and I'm feeling better.
Definitely.
That's very empowering.
Definitely. With that, I'll look at it. I think we talk about it from bottom up or top down. And so if we're looking at it from top down, then we're addressing the thought first. But if we're looking at it from the bottom up, then we're looking at the behavior.
Yeah.
And behaviors can help with the emotions, which then can help the way that we think.
What kinds of behaviors seem to, really help with this kind of, stuck anxiety, perfectionistic stuff? What could someone do to...
Yeah, one big one that I know a lot of people know, we all know this, but actually applying it can be difficult sometimes. Exercise is a huge one. And so if we can exercise, then that will help us to feel better because of the endorphins that it creates. And then our thought process, it'll be easier to challenge those thoughts. If we are feeling better and we're in a good place physically. And I'll say sometimes if you can exercise alone, great. If that's what you like, then, you can listen to music if that helps. But then sometimes exercising with a friend, you're getting like two behaviors in one.
Some social connection.
Yes. Because one other behavior would be connection. And so connecting with someone else, finding out that maybe this belief that everyone else has it together and you don't isn't the case. And so that is really, really helpful.
Because when you hang out with people, if you hang long enough, and it doesn't take that long, you realize they're not perfect either. Is that what you mean? Okay.
Yeah. If we can connect and talk about our struggles with someone that we trust, then we find out that we're not alone.
Yeah.
In that.
That's why it's so... anxiety and depression can really start to snowball and get pretty wicked. Because if I feel so bad about myself, I don't want to go be around people. If the anxiety thought wins, I'm more prone to start isolating. And then when I'm isolated, I don't have any evidence that my thoughts aren't true.
Right.
And so I feel worse and I isolate more. And
definitely,
it's such a dangerous kind of vortex we could get sucked into, clients could get sucked into. So I love it. So connection, exercise, I love the super concrete stuff. Yeah.
I think that's good what you just said about isolation, just because if we're already having thoughts that we are the worst or unlovable or something like that, then we isolate, then that only fuels the idea that we aren't lovable. No one can meet us where we're at with our anxiety.
Yeah.
And so if we have someone who we can trust, who can challenge our thoughts and show us that even when we are struggling, we're still fun to be around, or it's still okay for us to be around, then that really helps us to feel less alone and to challenge whatever those beliefs are.
I think it goes both ways. I think I've seen it. I work with a lot of couples and work with relationships, as you know, and it's often said, I got to first work on myself in order to be better relationally. And there's absolutely truth to that. There are things that, are individual tasks, stuff that are for me. And if I can just be in relationship, that's going to make me a better person too. If it's a mostly healthy relationship, just connecting is going to have a reciprocating positive impact on me.
Definitely.
Anything else you want to note about what helps when this perfectionistic kind of pull gets going?
Yeah, I'm thinking I don't want to be do this, and this, and it'll all go away. But I do think there is something to be said about the social media issue that we have.
Okay.
And we talk a lot about that, and it all sounds good, and it's we should stop doing this, and it's not helping us, and especially adolescents, it's not helping. But, and so that's why I'm hesitant to say just quit social media, because I know that's not really what people need to hear. I think we
to
need,
your point earlier, maybe that's too that's not neutralizing it. That's like maybe too far on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Just get rid of social media.
And if you're someone who is like, yeah, I'm not letting my kids on it, great. I mean, that
more power to you.
That is
for sure
probably the best way to go right now. But if that's not where we're at, then, you know, it can be hard to break the habit, and we have to figure out how we're actually going to go about that in a way that's realistic, where we can accomplish the goal.
That's well said. It makes sense. Could be reducing the time, or only doing it in certain contexts, or having some accountability with it.
Yeah. We just get exposed to so much information on there. And I've seen that in myself, where something that I haven't even thought about at all, suddenly I get on there and someone's got a video about, you know, do these 5 things to reduce your risk of blank. And I'm like, well, I wasn't even thinking about getting this thing.
The horizon has moved.
Yes.
Now you are.
Yes. Or maybe it's someone is sharing their kid's birthday party, and they got someone to come dress up, and it looks really good. And you're like, I didn't even throw my kid a birthday party this year.
Yeah.
That's something that happens to me all the time. So yeah, it's really tough.
I've said this before, and I heard it, a friend of mine joked with me about it, but I've said it to so many people now. Like, it used to be back in the day when I was growing up, that if you weren't the coolest kid in school and you're struggling and you're anxious, well, at least on the weekend, you could come home, you could hang out with your little sister, I don't know, play some games, watch TV, and forget about it. But now it's a constant kind of scroll through, looking at everyone's curated, like, false best self that they're putting forth, and we're alone in our thoughts. We can be if we're isolated, too much of it, comparing and just feeling bad.
Yeah, for sure. And I don't want to get into this like it's all bad, and
no,
you know, I think there are some good things about it.
We'll probably post this conversation on social media.
Yeah.
There are some all bad. No.
Really helpful resources on there that I use, and I think it's good to limit how many resources you're looking at on there, because we don't want to have to digest too much. You know, take a little bit and chew on it and apply it. But yeah, some people are sharing what's really going on. The other day I was like, I wonder what would happen if I just like typed out exactly what happened today, and like just see what people say. And it wasn't an amazing day. And so, yeah.
Tell me, how are you hoping parents who are listening to this right now, whether they're thinking about themselves as parents, or maybe it's just an adult dealing with anxiety, maybe they're not a parent, or maybe they're thinking about their teenager or their child, how do you want the listeners to feel, kind of as we begin to wrap up, after this kind of conversation? We've kind of gone around the CBD triangle, right? We talked about thinking, talked to them about behaviors and doing. What are you hoping people kind of take away, like at a heart level?
Yeah, that's a big question too. I hope people feel a little bit relieved, maybe.
Okay.
I really hope people can take a deep breath and say, you know, I can get off the hamster wheel. I can rest. And that's something that I hope people feel whenever we have a session together. It's just some relief that we can take the pressure off in many different ways, like we've talked about. And, you know, there are other things we can do, but your child is unique. You are unique. And that's a really good thing. So if we can try our best not to look at what everyone else is doing, and just look at the ways that we're, you know, one thing I'll say when people come is the fact that you're here talking about these things. The fact that you're listening to this podcast shows that you care so much. The fact that you come and want to talk about your child's needs shows that you care so much.
Evidence that you care.
And that in itself is great.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can learn how to rest, I mean, that's easier said than done. It's something that we have to be intentional about and do in specific ways. But if we can do that and take the pressure off, we might actually find that our kids are performing better, or that we're able to connect easier and just talk about what's really going on with other people. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. I mean, it's less pressure. So the positive opposite would be things like rest, relief, contentment, a sense of it's okay. I'll be okay. We'll
and that's
be okay.
something we have to take day by day.
Yeah.
If we're looking, just look at it today and try to focus on what can I do today, what can I do tomorrow. Not this is another thing I have to work on so hard. But one thing that I think is interesting about anxiety and treating anxiety is that the harder if someone says, I want to get rid of this, I want this to go away right now, it actually stays longer.
There's a huge paradoxical reality of it that we've got to kind of acknowledge and accept it. Doesn't mean we love it and approve of it. We've got to accept it's here. And ironically, then we have more power over it. The more I hate it, the more it wins.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a little mind-boggling for sure. This is tricky stuff. This is so helpful, though. I appreciate you bringing these thoughts, bringing the topic, the pressure to be perfect, and all these great ways to kind of help ourselves, help our children, ultimately help our communities as we continue to just move more and more towards health.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah. Talk to you next time.
Sounds good.